Well, Dr. Michio Kaku co-founded string field theory and is a theoretical physicist, best-selling author, acclaimed public speaker, renowned futurist, and popularizer of science. Dr. Kaku continues Einstein's search for a theory of everything, seeking to unify the four fundamental forces of the universe: the strong force, the weak force, gravity, and electromagnetism. Now, Dr. Kaku is the author of several PhD-level textbooks and has had more than 70 articles published in physics journals covering topics such as superstring theory, supergravity, supersymmetry, and hadronic physics. He has starred in science programs on the Discovery Channel, the Science Channel, the BBC, ABC, and the History Channel. And Dr. Michio Kaku hosts Science Fantastic and Explorations in Science, two weekly radio programs heard on stations around the country and podcast around the world. And it really is an absolute pleasure to welcome Dr. Michio Kaku to the program tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to the show, Doctor.
Well, after such a great introduction, I can't wait to hear the speaker myself.
Yeah, we're all in anticipation of who this very bright person is. So, exactly. Well, we've got your book. You've got this new book, The Future of Humanity. So it seems to me, Doctor, that the question is, what is the future of humanity?
Well, I think the future of humanity is to go into outer space. Our destiny is to become a spacefaring civilization. Now, realize that the dinosaurs did not have a space program. That's why the dinosaurs aren't here today. The dinosaurs never got a space program, and they were not able to leave the planet when that asteroid or meteor hit Mexico 65 million years ago. We may be faced with a similar catastrophe in the future, and so we have to be prepared. One day, we may need an insurance policy. One day, we may have to leave the planet Earth. We need Plan B. And that's why I think that we should explore outer space out of self-preservation. Not that it's going to happen anytime soon. We don't know when it's going to happen, but we know it will happen. 99.9% of all life forms have gone extinct. Extinction is the norm. Most species go extinct. Now, if you don't believe me, just dig right under your feet until you hit fossils and bones of the 99.9% that never made it. And so that's why we need a backup plan. We have to become a multi-planet species. And I think we're entering a new golden age in space exploration. It's going to be cheaper, more efficient, safer. We're entering a second golden age in space exploration. And that's why I wanted to write this book.
Well, doesn't it all start with the collapse of Moore's Law? Isn't that going to help us down this road toward space exploration?
Well, Moore's Law says that computer power doubles every 18 months, and that's why we have all these fantastic devices in our living room. But where did it come from? Well, during the first space age, back in the 1960s, the Pentagon and the government wanted us physicists to miniaturize computers as much as possible to fit in the capsule of the Apollo mission. That's why we created the microchips and perfected it. And that's why we have the iPhone. And that's why we have the Internet. And that's why we have all these technological wonders, because of the first golden age in space exploration. Now, the President of the United States has made it official. We're going back to the moon. Next year, December of 2019, we're going to send an unmanned probe all the way to the moon. 4 years after that, we're going to send astronauts back to the moon. And so we could be entering a second golden era of space exploration, in which case we need quantum computers, a new generation of computers, because eventually Moore's Law will collapse. The age of silicon will gradually come to a close. Right now, your Pentium chip has a layer that is 20 atoms across. Eventually, it'll be 5 atoms across. At that point, you get leakage. Electrons leak out because of the uncertainty principle. Heat is generated, which melts the transistor. And Moore's Law collapses. And so we have to go to a new generation of computers, perhaps quantum computers. And the second space age will help to fund it. You realize that Silicon Valley billionaires are funding this new second era of space exploration. Elon Musk, just a few weeks ago, got the imagination of millions of people fired up when he launched the Falcon Heavy from Cape Canaveral.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why was it so dramatic? Because that was a moon rocket. For the first time in 50 years, a moon rocket sailed off from Cape Canaveral. That was a moon rocket. And NASA has its own moon rocket. We could have a traffic jam over the moon in the future. And I firmly believe that our grandkids may have the option of honeymooning on the moon. So the moon is only a hop, skip, and a jump away, just 3 days away.
Well, space tourism. Now, that does sound exciting, but what's going to happen first? Are the robots going to take over and kill us, or will we make it to Mars? Which do you think will happen first?
Well, first of all, we have this debate between two billionaires. We have Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, who says, come on, don't get all excited about the robots taking over. We're going to enter a new golden age of robotics, jobs, economic activity, prosperity, all of that as a consequence of artificial intelligence. And then we have Elon Musk, another billionaire, who says, not so fast. Let's not be naive. Eventually they could become dangerous. Who knows? Maybe they might put us behind bars, throw peanuts at us, and make us dance behind bars like we do with bears and monkeys. Well, I was asked by CNN, who's right? And my point of view, actually, they're both a little bit right. In the short term, I think Zuckerberg is right. In the short term, for decades to come, I think we're going to have a bonanza of economic benefits, jobs, economic activity, new industries are going to be opened up because of artificial intelligence. But in the long term, that is by the end of the century, let's not be naive. The tipping point is self-awareness. See, robots are not self-aware. They're adding machines. They don't know they're robots. You can't go to a robot and have a conversation about robots and humans. No, they're not self-aware at all. But by the end of the century, they could become self-aware. Now, robots today have the intelligence of a cockroach, a retarded cockroach. Realize that a cockroach in a forest can find food, run around, find mates, find shelter, all of that with a cockroach. You take our most advanced robot and you put it in a forest, and what does it do? It gets lost. But eventually I can foresee robots becoming as smart as a mouse, as smart as a rat, then a rabbit, then a cat, then a dog, and finally a monkey, perhaps by the end of the century. At that point, they could be dangerous because monkeys are self-aware. Monkeys know they are not human. Now, dogs, on the other hand, they're confused. You see, dogs think that we are a dog, that we are the top dog.
That's right.
And they're the underdog. That's why they slobber all over us. They think, with their limited intelligence, that we are dogs just like them, except we're the top dog. Monkeys have no illusion. And when robots become as smart as a monkey, I think we should put a chip in their brain to shut them off if they have murderous thoughts.
If they have murderous thoughts, I mean, isn't that something we can try to prevent? Before they become self-aware, could we have some sort of a measure put in place so that prevent them from becoming self-aware? I think once that happens, it will be a runaway problem that we won't be able to control.
Well, eventually, not in this century, but in the next century, in the 22nd century, robots are going to become increasingly more sophisticated, even with a chip in their brain to shut them off, even with a fail-safe system. Eventually, they'll figure out how to neutralize the fail-safe system. Now, remember, this is more than 100 years into the future. At that point, I think we should merge with them. Merge with them. We should take advantage of all the incredible powers of artificial intelligence and merge with our creations. Rather than compete with our creations, I think we should merge with them.
Okay. In what way? How exactly? Does this mean I become part Borg?
Well, in some sense, yes. However, I think we'll pretty much look the same. Some people think that in science fiction novels, we're going to become a brain in a vat of liquid. Who wants to live like that?
Not me.
Or that we'll be inside a computer. Who wants to live inside a computer for the rest of eternity? Well, no, I don't think it's going to be that way at all. I believe in what I call the caveman principle, or the cave woman principle. We haven't changed much in our personality for 100,000 years. You give us a shave, put on a three-piece suit on a caveman, and put them on Wall Street, and they look like all the other barbarians on Wall Street. Identical. We haven't changed much in 100,000 years. And what do we want? After food, mates, and shelter, we want to look good. We want to have the prestige of our peers and the admiration of the opposite sex. That's what we want. And you can't have that if you look like a fruit on a blind date. So that's why I think that we will have enhancements. We'll be able to upload memories, increase our intelligence, increase our memory. We'll have these abilities, but then on a blind date, we'll take them off and look normal again. So I think that we don't want to look like a freak. And I think that's a constraint that is going to prevent us from looking like a brain in a vat of liquid.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, there's this old cheesy movie, Johnny Mnemonic. I don't know if you ever saw that, but in the movie, they live in a future where you can get implants. And I remember seeing that movie as a young girl thinking, I don't want that. I don't want implants in my body. Now, if we're talking about a second brain, utilizing the artificial intelligence that way, the same way I do with my smartphone, it's an external kind of a thing, or the contact lenses that you talk about connected to the internet, now that I might be able to live with something like that, and it certainly would change. I mean, the future of humanity that you talk about is a very exciting future. There's a lot ahead of us, a whole lot. So much that it's almost difficult to know where to start with you, but I think the space race, if we can call it that right now, we've got a golden age of space travel that kind of passed, and then we're headed into a new space age, aren't we?
That's right. You know the movie The Martian, starring Matt Damon? Mm-hmm. Great movie. It cost $100 million. But the Indian government put a space probe on Mars for $70 million. So a Hollywood movie about going to Mars costs more than actually going to Mars with a space probe. They should give an Oscar for the best supporting spacecraft. That's how cheap rockets have become. And then with Elon Musk and the reusable rockets are going to be even cheaper than that. Realize that to put a pound of anything into orbit around the Earth, just around orbit, the Earth, costs $10,000 a pound. That's your weight in gold. So think of your body made out of gold. That's what it costs to put you in orbit. Now, with the reusable rocket, that cost could go down by a factor of 10. In the same way that the used car market revolutionized car ownership. You know, we forget the fact that after World War II, a lot of GIs came back. They couldn't afford cars. So the used car market flourished in the post-war era. So now we're going to have used rockets. That's going to, again, drop the cost of space travel.
Well, why not put our energy and resources that we'd put into going to Mars into solving problems here on Earth?
I think we should do both. We have self-inflicted problems like global warming, like nuclear proliferation, like germ warfare. So these are self-inflicted. We also have natural disasters like supervolcanoes under Yellowstone, also meteor impacts from outer space, and another ice age in 10,000 years. And in 5 billion years, the sun will eat up the Earth. The laws of physics are a death warrant for humanity. As I said, the upper limit is 5 billion years. After that, the Earth is going to be eaten up by the atmosphere of the sun. And so I think that given these facts, that it would be prudent for us to have an insurance policy. I once talked to Carl Sagan, and he told me that we live in a cosmic shooting gallery. So many pieces of debris out there that could hit the Earth. Mm-hmm. And so we need to be at least a two-planet species, he said. At least a two-planet species. Mm. And that, I think, is where we are headed. So we have all these problems on Earth, as you said, correctly. we're not going to simply abandon the Earth. No one is saying that. We're going to have to clean up our mess because we don't want to mess up Mars as well. We have to clean up the Earth. But that doesn't mean we can't have an insurance policy at the same time. Plan B, in other words.
Well, have you thought about the possibility of finding life once we get to Mars, even if we find simple forms of life?
Well, we've looked real hard for life on Mars. It's possible that microbial life may exist perhaps in the polar ice cap region. We've never explored the polar ice caps very well. And also underground. So as Mars lost its atmosphere and water billions of years ago, and you were a Martian, where would you go? If your water was going into outer space, into the ice caps, and into the permafrost underground, where would you go?
Underground.
You would follow the water, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You'd also flee into outer space, go to the ice caps, or go underground. We have not gone to the ice caps. We have not gone underground. So there's still hope for those people that there are Martians on Mars.
Well, how do you think we're going to get there? I mean, I understand that the cost of exploring space is going down, but exactly how are we going to do this? Do we have reusable craft? Do we use the moon as a stop-off point or a gas station? Exactly how does this happen?
Well, NASA finally laid it out, a agenda that next year we're going back to the moon with the SLS booster rocket and Orion space capsule. It's an unmanned mission to orbit the moon next year, December. Then in around 2013, 3 years after that, we're going to go back to the moon with astronauts. Astronauts will go back to the moon on the SLS booster. And then around 2016, we're going to create a lunar space station that orbits not the Earth, that orbits the moon. From that orbiting space station, we're going to create the moon rocket, the Mars rocket, which will eventually then take us to Mars. That's NASA's program. Now, Elon Musk, this billionaire, has his own program. He wants to create a super rocket that essentially bypasses the space station and goes directly to Mars. His Mars rocket may actually beat NASA. His Mars rocket is called the BFR. B for big, R for rocket, and F for your imagination.
I'm not. Why am I even surprised? I should not be surprised. This is Elon Musk we're talking about.
Right.
He has a good time with it, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm. So there's new blood being injected, and the richest man on Earth, Jeff Bezos of Amazon, he also wants to go to the moon and Mars. He's created his own spaceport. Can you imagine that? He doesn't have to go to Cape Canaveral. He has his own spaceport in Texas. He has his own fleet of rockets. And that's why I said we could have a traffic jam around the moon.
That's talk about some unforeseen problems. There is definitely one. What is the ultimate goal? Do we want to have a base on the moon? Do we want to have a base on Mars? Or are we going so far as the idea of even terraforming Mars?
In my book, The Future of Humanity, I say that first we're going to create a settlement on Mars, maybe a few hundred people, and it'll be self-sustaining. They'll be able to grow their own food using genetically modified algae and crops. Crops love carbon dioxide, and that's what the atmosphere of Mars is made of. Mining operations will be conducted to mine the ice. Ice is very valuable. Mars has plenty of ice. Ice could be melted for drinking water and separated out for hydrogen and oxygen. Hydrogen for rocket fuel and oxygen for breathing. So mining operations will begin. And then after that, we should think about terraforming Mars. If we have satellites around Mars that could beam energy, solar energy, onto the ice caps, we might be able to melt the ice caps and liquid water will flow freely on Mars again. Realize that billions of years ago, Mars had an ocean, a liquid water ocean, about the size of the United States. We see remnants of riverbeds, remnants of, things like the Mississippi Delta on Mars. And so we might be able to terraform Mars, in other words, make Mars into a Garden of Eden. Of course, it'll take many, many decades or centuries to do that, But, like I said, this is a long-term project.
Very long term. Very, very long term. But isn't it an inhospitable place? How would we survive there? I mean, and then if we melted the water, wouldn't the water simply evaporate out into space?
Well, you're right that Mars lost its water billions of years ago. And so periodically we may have to re-terraform Mars every few centuries, for example. Otherwise Mars will lose its atmosphere. See, Mars has no magnetic field to speak of. Therefore, the solar wind blasts the atmosphere of Mars unabated, and the solar wind can blow its atmosphere into outer space. This, of course, takes millennia to do, but it happened on Mars over thousands and millions of years. So we might have to re-terraform Mars every few centuries. But once we terraform it, it's going to be good, I think, for several centuries before we have to, re-terraform it again.
Well, then, okay, so are we then talking about if there's space tourism to the moon, would there then eventually be space tourism all the way to Mars once it's terraformed, once we have bases there? Is this also part of our goals to save humanity?
I think eventually people will have honeymoons on Mars. And I think that we're talking about a tourist attraction, many tourist attractions. The volcanoes of Mars are the biggest volcanoes in the solar system. It would extend from New York City all the way to Montreal, Canada, if that volcano, Mount Olympus, were on the Earth. And the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon of Mars is as big as the United States of America. It is a gash 3,000 miles long called Mariner Valley. It would be an incredible tourist attraction. Think of it. Our Grand Canyon is tiny, microscopic, compared to the Grand Canyon of Mars. In fact, everything is bigger on Mars. Mountains taller than Mount Everest are quite common on the surface of Mars. And so Mars, I think, will become a tourist attraction. Its atmosphere is pink. Can you imagine watching a pink sunset? And everything is different about Mars. It would be a tourist attraction.
And if you stand on the surface of Mars, I wonder if you look out, will you see the Earth, the little blue dots of the Earth? I bet you would.
You would have to look pretty hard. See, when we look up, we can see Mars. You can see Mars tonight. Just go outside, look in the direction of the ecliptic plane, face south, and you can actually see the planets lined up like jewels along the ecliptic. And so, from Mars, you can see the Earth as a pale blue dot.
Yeah, well, the astronauts talk about having this incredible experience when they see the Earth from afar. And that's just something that most us humans down here on Earth have never had that experience of standing on another world, looking out. Does it see that pale little blue dot way out there? Yeah, that's Earth. And we got to take a break here, Dr. Kaku, but it makes me think about those tourist to other planets posters that NASA has. Have you ever seen those? Maybe those will actually come in handy one day.
Yeah, I think so.
I wanted to ask you a question about going to Mars. You know, when you talk about going to Mars, you make it sound so easy. I recently read an article about Elon Musk talking about going to Mars, and he said that the first few people who went might die.
He's also famous for saying that he himself would love to go to Mars, but not on impact. In other words, he doesn't want to die on Mars. He wants to go to Mars, but, of course, he wants to go safely. Well, just remember that the early pioneers realized that they were taking their life in their hands, and realized that even our astronauts who go into outer space, 1% of the time, there's a misfire. Our rockets blow up, or if they don't function properly. This is something that astronauts are accustomed to facing, because they are, for the main, test pilots, and they're trained to handle these kinds of emergencies. And they know that, 1% of the time they're not going to come back. And, however, I think as we get more experience with rockets, prices are going to drop. Other nations are going to be involved. For example, the Chinese. The Chinese have already stated that they want to put the Chinese flag on the moon. Their first goal is to have a space station, Chinese space station in outer space. The space station that's going to come down someplace on the planet Earth, perhaps on April Fool's Day, is just part one of their building of a permanent space station for the Chinese government. And after that, they want to go to the moon. And so we could have a gold rush as so many nations head toward the moon and eventually to Mars. And so this is going to become commonplace. We're going to have a traffic jam over the moon and a traffic jam around Mars.
And a good old-fashioned space race like we haven't had in many decades, right?
Yeah, and the Russians, of course, and the European Union, they've all mumbled about the possibility of them also fielding a mission to Mars. And so, with prices dropping, with more nations getting interested, we are talking about a new second golden age in space exploration.
God, it's so exciting. I mean, I want the same thing for humanity. I want to see us go out and explore the stars. And you're so good at predicting the future. I know that you're not a psychic. You just follow trends. But you're very good at this. So would you take us into the future of what Mars looks like once we begin terraforming it, once we begin building a base there? Exactly what does that look like?
Well, first of all, when we go to Mars, lava tubes are gigantic caves that occur naturally, left over from ancient volcanoes. These lava tubes are great for a Mars base. They would protect astronauts against radiation. And if you saw the movie 2001, realize the moon base was underground. It was underground. It's the quickest, fastest way to build a base on Mars is to take advantage of that. And then, as I mentioned, mining operations to mine the ice. Also, agriculture will get started. And I think even space tourism will get started. And if you can raise the temperature by 6 degrees, if you could raise the temperature of Mars by 6 degrees, then the greenhouse effect takes over. It becomes a positive feedback loop, and Mars terraforms itself. You have to raise the temperature, however, by 6 degrees. That means perhaps you may have to inject certain greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, or maybe even water vapor. Comets have plenty of water. It may be possible to deflect a comet so that it orbits around Mars and slowly disintegrates in its orbit, releasing large quantities of water vapor into the atmosphere of Mars. And so if you could raise the temperature by 6 degrees, Mother Nature does the rest of the work. And realize that we're terraforming the Earth now, for worse, not for better. But we are terraforming the Earth. So the concept of terraforming is not new. We're terraforming the Earth right now because of economic activity on the planet. Now we want to do it on Mars, but we want to do it safely. Now, Elon Musk, of course, thinks big. He's entertained the idea of dropping hydrogen warheads on the ice caps of Mars to speed up the melting process.
Yeah, I read about that.
Yeah, I don't think our astronauts want to drink radioactive water. So I think that solar satellites is perhaps the fastest and cheapest way to melt the ice caps to make sure that liquid water flows freely on the surface of Mars.
Well, and then you talk about, I remember you mentioning earlier that once we get to Mars, it will become self-sustaining. We can grow food there. We can harvest energy there. Exactly how does that happen? I mean, it sounds real nice when you say it, but the how part is a little confusing.
Well, first of all, energy. That's the first order of business when you land on Mars. You have to energize your circuits, your batteries, and we'll have plenty of solar cells to do that. Mars does have enough sunlight to energize the solar batteries. If you saw the movie The Martian, you realize that's one of the first things you do. And also, we can duplicate Mars soil on the Earth. And when we do that, we found out that we can make brick. We can make brick out of the sands of Mars by heating up the sands. And so I think the first settlements on Mars, once we create, bases out of lava tubes, will be to create buildings. And these buildings will be made of brick that come from the Martian soil. And so we'll adapt. We'll adapt to the local conditions on Mars. And eventually I even think we'll have Martian Olympics. Athletes will love the fact that the gravitational pull is much lower. gymnastics, ballet, figure skating, all sorts of sports would be spectacular because you could do not just triple jumps, but quadruple, quintuple jumps. But because the gravitational pull of Mars is only like 1/3 that of the planet Earth. In fact, if you take a look at science fiction, Edgar Rice Burroughs, who created Tarzan, also created John Carter of Mars decades ago, and he became a Superman on Mars because the gravitational pull on Mars is so weak compared to the Earth. And many people suspect that was the inspiration for Superman. The first issue of Superman says very clearly that the gravitational pull of the Earth is less than that of Krypton, and that's why Superman has superpowers. And so Mars is part of our folklore. We think that's probably the origin of Superman.
Interesting. Well, I know I won't be around to see this future. So let's switch gears to back to Earth. We might see that very in my late years. I may see us trying to terraform Mars.
Right. Immortality is something I write about in my book because, of course, once we go to the stars now, we may have to lengthen the human lifespan.
That's right.
And I think we'll become immortal two ways. We'll have digital immortality, and we'll also have genetic immortality. Two kinds of immortalities. Digital immortality is when we digitize everything known about who we are. Already a Silicon Valley company is offering to take your digital footprint, your credit card transactions, your Instagram photograph, everything, to create a composite image of who you are. I think in the future when you go to the library, instead of taking out a book about Winston Churchill, you'll talk to Winston Churchill. You'll talk to a holographic image of him with all his mannerisms, all his speech inflections, all his memories, everything that's known about the guy to create a library image that you can talk to. Now, I wouldn't mind talking to Einstein. I would love to have an opportunity to talk about Einstein, talk to him about the unified field theory and the theory of everything. And I think one day we'll be digitized, too, in the same way. You'll have a great conversation with your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandkids who want to talk to their great-great-great-great-great-great ancestor because we've been digitized. And what are we going to do with it once we become immortal and we become digitized? I think we'll put that information on a laser beam and shoot it to the moon. In 1 second, your consciousness will be on the moon. In 20 minutes, your consciousness will be on Mars. In 4 years, you'll reach the nearby stars. I call this laser porting. And on the moon, we have a computer which downloads your connectome, that is all the connections inside your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And then you wind up in a mainframe, but then you control a mechanical avatar. So you don't live your life out as an immortal being inside a computer. That's boring. No, you control an avatar. You see through the avatar. You touch things through the mechanical avatar, this robot, and you become Superman and Superwoman. Superhuman powers. You can float over the surface of Mars. You can dance on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. And you can enjoy the solar system at the speed of light. In fact, in an afternoon, you can visit most of the planets of the solar system in an afternoon. So I think this is laser porting. And I think that this already exists. I'll stick my neck out.
Whoa!
I think aliens from outer space, they don't bother with flying saucers. That's so 20th century. They can laser port their consciousness across the universe at the speed of light. Think about that. There could be a superhighway next to the Earth, a superhighway carrying billions of souls of aliens as they rocket across the galaxy at the speed of light. And we humans are too stupid to know it.
Well, you might want to talk to John Lear, because he used to talk about, way back in the early 90s, of a soul-collecting station on the moon, and I always thought he was a little crazy for saying that. Don't get me wrong, I have a high level of respect for John Lear, but I always thought this idea was wild. And, well, maybe he's not so far off. I'm a little stunned to hear this from you tonight, Doctor.
Yeah, we're talking about known technology. We're not talking about things that we have to invent out of nothing. No, the gradual digitization of us as people is taking place now. We can digitize your digital fingerprint. Eventually, we'll digitize your brain and all the neural circuits. That's called the Connectome Project. And as a consequence, we'll be able to create copies of ourselves. Now, the question is, how real are these copies of ourselves that look like us, talk like us, act like us, have all our memories?
Mm-hmm.
Well, to paraphrase Bill Clinton, it all depends on how you define you. If you are a biological entity, then this is a tape recorder that really does a great job imitating you. But if you is the sum total of all your memories, experiences, sensations, desires, hopes, dreams, if that's you, then we can digitize your soul and send it into outer space and conquer the universe at the speed of light.
Speed of light. Now, I have two ideas about this. Number one, it sounds like it will put talk show hosts out of business. And number two, it sounds like
opportunity to broadcast your show across the universe.
Right, that was my other idea. That wait a minute, now hang on. This could turn you into the immortal talk show host for now and for all of time. Once you're digitized, they put you on.
Digital immortality, right?
Yes, and then you can host talk shows 24/7 and always be on the air, I would imagine.
That's right. And on weekends, you become Superman or Superwoman with a perfect body, with superpowers, and you can vacation on several planets in an afternoon.
I really like this. Tell me more.
Yeah. Now, then the question that many people ask is there a laser port on the Earth? That is, if the aliens already do this, if this is their preferred way of zipping across the galaxy at the speed of light, then is there a downloading station already on the Earth? Let's say an alien species out there in outer space wants a vacation on the Earth. Well, you would have to have a receiver on the Earth that downloads their connectome from a laser beam and then inserts that consciousness into an avatar, which can look like anything. It could look like an animal. It could look like a human. Whatever. As long as you can create an avatar, a mechanical avatar, that is a robot, that has your consciousness in it, then for all intents and purposes, you can vacation on different planets disguised as different kinds of animals. You may like to be on a certain planet and look somewhat like a dinosaur on that planet, or look like one of the inhabitants of that planet. So you could have a wild weekend simply zipping across different planets and satellites at the speed of light and assuming different forms in the process. It would be a great vacation.
Oh, my God. Well, I could do broadcasts maybe from the rings of Saturn or something crazy like that. But I think
That's right. You wouldn't have to worry about oxygen. You wouldn't have to worry about radiation or gravity because, you have a robotic body that you see through, you touch through, and you control. And you can zip across the rings of Saturn.
Wow. Well,
I think this probably already exists. Aliens from outer space are maybe thousands of years more advanced than us. This technology is only maybe 100 years away. We'll have the connectome finished perhaps by the end of this century. We have lasers of incredible power already. And so I think by into the next century, this is a possibility. We don't have to wait thousands of years for it.
Tell me more about the Connectome Project. Is this to digitize a living human consciousness? Is that what this project is about?
Well, in America, we've had several big science projects. We had the Manhattan Project, which gave us the atomic bomb. And then we had the Genome Project that gave us the human genome. And the next project could be the Connectome Project, in which we're going to map the entire brain. Now, politicians are pushing it. It was initiated by former President Barack Obama. And why? Because of mental illness. Mental illness is one of the great afflictions of the human race. Many people are depressed. 1% of the human race is schizophrenic. And we want to understand this very ancient disease. Even the Bible makes allusions to mental illness. And the connectome could be the key to that. And we have new ways now of mapping the pathways of the brain. Optogenetics allows us to use light as a way to map the neural pathways for certain kinds of behaviors. And so I think by the end of the century, we'll have a very good understanding of how the brain is put together, and we'll use that to create a copy, a digital copy of you that has all your memories, all your sensations, and that copy will live forever. So this takes us back now to the Middle Ages. During the Middle Ages, we had something called dualism, where most people believed there was a soul which departed your body when you died. So that was called dualism, the mind-body dualism. Then came neuroscience of the 20th century, and neuroscientists said, bah, humbug. There's only neurons there. That's all there is. There's no soul. There's just neurons in the brain. Now we're going back to the Middle Ages. We're going back to dualism, because we now realize that the sum total of all your memories and all your sensations can be separated from you. And it, in fact, could become immortal. And so digital immortality, in some sense, is a reflection of thinking going back to the Middle Ages.
So then you're saying that the soul is real?
The soul could be information. Now, I don't know. What I'm saying is there is a theory that says that the soul is the sum total of all your sensations and feelings and hopes and dreams and desires and personalities. All of that is what we call the soul, and that can be reduced to information, which in turn can be digitized, and in this case, by laser pointing, shot throughout the universe to explore the cosmos at the speed of light.
Well, let me ask you this. Would you do it?
I would love to have an opportunity to explore the universe. Realize that we're stuck on this little mud ball called this pale blue dot called the Earth, and there's a whole universe out there, a whole universe. As Jodie Foster said in the movie Contact, what a waste.
Yes.
What a waste when you look in the night sky and you see these billions and billions of stars that you will never visit. You'll never visit them. However, if you can laser port yourself, you can probably visit quite a few of these stars.
Well, sure. I've always wondered. Of course, this is a question that comes from my, very early childhood. What is outside of the solar system? As soon as I learned about the solar system, I just wanted to know what was beyond that, and then what's beyond that, and on and so on and so forth. And it does make you wonder if we'll achieve this. But you know what it really makes me wonder, Doctor?
What?
If I am uploaded in this digital form, am I going to feel that?
Oh, are you going to feel pain? No.
Am I going
totally
to feel
painless.
it at all? What does it feel like to be in a digitized form?
Well, first of all, it's not going to be like being lonely, being inside a computer with no sensations and no ability to interact with the outside world. There was one episode of Star Trek where the aliens were so advanced that they put their souls inside these glowing spheres, and they were immortal, but they were bored. Who wants to spend the rest of your life or eternity inside a sphere, even if it's glowing in the dark? Well, that misses the point. The point is that if the aliens are that advanced, they can create a mechanical avatar that looks like you, has a perfect body, has superhuman strength, and can live on the moon, can live on Mars because it is a robot, and you can see through the robot. You can feel what the robot feels. So for all intents and purposes, you are Superman, Superwoman. And so that, I think, is the way that we should colonize the universe. At the speed of light, in an afternoon, we can sail across several planets, visit several planets in an afternoon, and think of the vacations you could have. And like I said, you don't even have to be human. You could occupy the life of an animal, an alien animal on a distant solar system. Now, again, all this sounds fantastic, but it is well within the laws of physics and computer science. In fact, I think by the end of the century, we'll have this capability.
The end of the century, you'll have consciousness free of all of the pain and everything that having a body entails. Well, that really
except,
is.
Of course, we'll still be human. We'll have all the foibles and stupidness, silliness of Homo sapiens. Having our souls digitized does not make us wiser. We'll still be just as silly as ever, unfortunately.
Well, then that brings me to my next question, which is BrainNet. I've heard you talk about this BrainNet, and it's so interesting. It's so fascinating. And is this a little closer to 2018, BrainNet?
Yeah, it turns out that just a few years ago, scientists were able to upload the first memory and download the first memory in a mouse. Now they're doing it on primates, that is, recording memories as primates learn very simple tasks. And the short-term goal is to create a brain chip for Alzheimer's patients. Why do we have to suffer with the fading memory when we can record simple memories and upload them into the minds of Alzheimer's patients so they don't wander around the streets causing havoc, so they know who they are by pushing a button? Memories come flooding into their hippocampus. So that's today. In the future, we may be able to upload entire memories and sensations and feelings, and that could revolutionize the Internet. Teenagers already put a happy face at the end of every sentence. Why do that when you could put the entire emotion right after every sentence? So just think of it. Teenagers would love it. Their first date, their first dance, their first kiss, all the sensations can be put on the Internet. And this is going to revolutionize entertainment. Who wants to watch the movies when you can watch the feelies and actually feel what these actors are feeling? You know, actors like Charlie Chaplin were very famous when movies were silent. But when talkies came, a new generation of actors were introduced to the public, and Charlie Chaplin had to go into retirement. Same thing could happen here. A whole new set of actors and actresses could evolve that know how to emote, that know how to create emotions that people can feel and partake in. So I think this is the future of the Internet. The future of the Internet is not digital. The future of the Internet is to be emotional. And this is going to affect entertainment. It's going to affect commerce. It'll affect human relations, how we relate to each other. This is a form of telepathy and also a form of telekinesis. In other words, we're going to have the power that we usually find among gods. Gods can think something like Zeus could simply think something and have it come to be. So in the future, when we mentally connect ourselves to the Internet, we'll be very much like Harry Potter. Someone from the outside will view us as being magicians, wizards, simply thinking and having our wishes come true. And so this is happening sooner than you realize. We don't have it yet. But of course, I think that we will one day replace the Internet of today with the Internet 2.0, that is, BrainNet.
Don't you think there's going to be some growing pains right when we start using something like this?
Well, initially, but I think people will get used to the idea of communicating mentally with other people. They could create a bond between peoples that normally may even dislike each other. For example, people suffering. It's very hard to empathize with other people's suffering because people think that, well, maybe it's fake or maybe it's not so important. But if you can have a brain net connecting people, then people can judge for themselves if these emotions, these hurts, these wrongs are real. And that could help to break down barriers between people because so many different kinds of people feel victimized, and everyone's like a victim these days. And that puts a barrier between us. And so I think BrainNet could help to reduce these barriers. And also, think about it for a moment. Our grandparents, if they could somehow see us today with our technology, our grandparents lived in a very horrible time when we didn't live very long. Median age back then was in their 40s. Disease and hard labor was very common back then. They would consider us today to be wizards with our Internet and our rockets. Now, if we can see our great-grandkids, if we could see them in the year 2100, how would we view our own progeny? We would view them as having the power of a Greek god. Like Venus, they could have a perfect body and be nearly immortal. Like Mercury, they could have the ability to transport themselves on supersonic transports, flying cars, and things like that. Like Apollo, they would have the power of the sun. They would have fusion power on the Earth. And like Zeus, they would be able to have BrainNet. They would be able to think and mentally control computers that would move objects. That's called telekinesis, the ability to mentally move objects. We'll have that power. Telepathy is a byproduct of BrainNet as well. And so we'll have the power of the Greek gods that we once feared and worshipped, except we will be the gods. Now, of course, we will not have the wisdom of Solomon to go with it. We'll have all the stupidity and pettiness of the past with us. But it does mean that we can more or less predict the outlines of where we're going. That is, we're going to have the powers of the Greek gods.
But no politician on earth will survive this.
Well, democracy, I think, is the net outcome for all of this. Realize that, well, when I was in high school years ago, we learned about something called dictator for life. That if you were a surrogate of the Soviet Union or the United States, they couldn't get rid of you. But today we have much more democracy than before. Dictators get thrown out all the time. And I think the great enemy of dictatorships is the Internet. The Internet empowers people. And then when we go to BrainNet, I think it's going to empower us even more. We'll be able to create bonds between people, emotional bonds. And I think as a consequence, it means that the world is going to be more democratic with more input, and it's going to be a better world as a consequence.
Well, a lot of truth is going to come out, and you know what they say about the truth? They say that it hurts. So I think there will be an initial period, a painful period, and then somehow we'll adapt, because isn't that what life does? Life adapts. Yeah,
and the truth will set you free. And so I think that with the coming of BrainNet, we're going to break down barriers between people. We'll enhance our powers by simply thinking. We'll be able to dictate emails, communicate with people, download movies, just by blinking. You'll be able to have this power. The power usually associated with gods, but the power that we will have because of technology. And this, of course, is known technology. We're not talking about reinventing the laws of physics or anything like that.
Right. And you sound very excited about it. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, Doctor. It makes me a little nervous, but I'll go ahead and go into this future with you.
Well, just remember that we are genetically hardwired to be nervous about the future, because our ancestors who were not nervous about the future, who were devil-may-care and led a carefree life, well, their kids didn't survive. And so their progeny is not here to talk about it. Our ancestors were timid. Our ancestors were fearful of the future. That's why we're here, because their children, their progeny survived. And so I think that it's natural that our first instinct is to be a little bit fearful. You know, when the telephone first came out over 100 years ago, there were all these editorials denouncing the telephone.
Really?
Because, go to any library and look up articles from 100 years ago when the telephone came in. People were scared of it. They said that we're not going to talk to our kids so much. We'll talk to this disembodied voice in the ether. Think about it. We're just talking to nothing, and there we are having a conversation with nothing. And so people were a little bit afraid of it. But, you know, the critics were right. We don't spend that much time talking to our kids. We spend too much time talking to the ether, and we love it. We love the telephone.
That is certainly true.
And the same thing with the Internet. When the Internet first came out, people were fearful of it. And now you can't take people off the Internet.
No, it's a problem. In fact, I know there are some gamers in China who end up having to go to the hospital because they've been on the thing for so long. I think somebody has even died. I think a kid died in China.
In Japan, it's a phenomenon called the otaku. These are shut-ins. These are unemployed young men. They had nothing to do all day. They had no girlfriend, no friends. They spend all the time playing video games and shut up in their room. And their parents give them food in the morning and food at night, and they never come out of their room. That is a problem.
Well, then we need those avatars to get them out of the house.
And I tell parents who come to me and say their children spend too much time on the web, I say, first of all, it's a good thing, because a new etiquette is being created, a new social etiquette revolving around the Internet. But kids have to be socialized. Kids have to have a social life. So as long as your kids are socialized, then I don't see any problem being on the Internet, because there's a whole new etiquette being created by young people. A whole new culture.
No, it's true. It's true. And if we're going to adapt, then we have to figure out what is that etiquette? What is the right way to do things? What is acceptable?
In the future, I think it'll be mental. We'll simply mentally communicate via BrainNet, mentally communicate with our friends and have a better understanding of where they're coming from, because we'll be able to feel their emotions and feel what they feel.
Wow. Well, then that just might do away with talk shows altogether. I'll just stand on a stage and we can all just
mentally communicate with millions of people out there.
Yeah, mentally communicate with the audience out there. It would be completely different. Well, I was listening to Science Fantastic the other day, and you love to take questions on Science Fantastic, and one of the things that I decided to do with your appearance on the program tonight is collect questions from the listening audience. So what do you say we cross the streams a little bit with Midnight in the Desert and Science Fantastic and have a little bit of that? Some of the questions, I think, are really, really good. And I've been staring at this one on my notes, really wanting to pose this to you. So this came in from a listener who said, I would like to donate my submission for a question to Dr. Kaku to my mother. She taught me the joy of wondering about things bigger than I can comprehend, and I am eternally grateful. So her question is, if you could be given the answer to one unsolved question about the universe, and only one, what would that be? That's from Pax.
Well, Einstein thought there was a one-inch equation that would summarize all known physical laws. This is the theory of everything, and it's what I do for a living. That's my day job. The leading candidate for this is string theory. I'm the co-founder of one of the main branches of string theory, string field theory. But it's not in its final form. We don't have that one-inch equation yet. And so that's the hope. The hope that we'll be able to, quote, read the mind of God.
Yes.
So in string theory, why do we have so many particles? They're just nothing but different musical notes on a tiny, tiny rubber band, and the rubber band vibrates in different frequencies. That's why we have electrons and quarks and protons. And then physics is nothing but the laws of harmonies of these vibrating rubber bands. Chemistry is nothing but the melodies you can play on these interacting strings. The universe is a symphony of strings. And then the mind of God in this formulation would be cosmic music resonating through hyperspace. That is the mind of God.
Do you think you'll ever find that one-inch equation?
Well, I'm working on it. That's what we physicists do to find that ultimate formulation that eluded Einstein. When I was 8 years old, when Einstein died, they published a picture of his desk. I'll never forget that. That picture changed my life. That picture was a picture of his desk with the unfinished manuscript of the unified field theory. And the caption of the picture said something like this: "This is the unfinished work of the greatest scientist of our time." And I was only 8 years old, right? I didn't know what was happening. I said to myself, wow, this is incredible. I mean, why couldn't he finish it? I mean, it's a homework problem, right? Couldn't he ask his parents? I mean, why couldn't he finish this problem? So I went to the library, and I found out this man's name was Albert Einstein, and the unfinished work was called the unified field theory, the theory of everything. Now, today, I can read that book. I can see all the dead ends and all the mistakes and all the problems he had. But today, we think we can finish whole chapters of that book using string theory. String theory allows you to solve many of the mathematical stumbling blocks that he encountered trying to create the theory of everything.
So there's still a few calculations to go, but you're working on it. You know what I've always wondered about string theory is not why are there so many particles, but why are there so many dimensions in string theory?
Well, it's a mathematical problem that when strings break and they form two strings, a whole set of mathematical identities have to be carried out, and they only work in certain magic numbers. These are the magic numbers of mathematics. It turns out that even in mathematics, we have something called the elliptic modular function, with the magic numbers of 26 and 10, which are the magic numbers of string theory. And they also fix the dimensionality of space and time. Usually when you take something like Newton's laws, they can be formulated in any dimension. Believe it or not, the inverse square law can be generalized to be inverse cube, inverse quartic, or whatever. 3 is not fundamental other than the fact that we live in 3 dimensions. But string theory is unique. It selects out its own dimensionality, and it's not 3 or 4. We're up to 11 now. And so we think that that's the true home of Genesis. The true home of the Big Bang is 11-dimensional hyperspace. Now, for me, this was very pleasing because when I was a child, I was exposed to 2 kinds of religions. One is Buddhism. My parents were Buddhists. But I went to a Presbyterian church where we learned about Genesis and the beginning of time. You see, in Buddhism, there is no beginning. There's only nirvana, timelessness. So I've had these 2 opposite ideas in my mind for all these years. But now we can meld these 2 together into a single theory. You see, our universe is a bubble. It's expanding, but that's called the Big Bang Theory. But there are other bubbles out there, other parallel universes floating in a much larger nirvana of timelessness, of 11-dimensional timelessness, nirvana. And so our universe had a genesis. Our universe did have an origin, like the Bible says. However, there's also a nirvana, because our universe is a bubble floating in a much larger nirvana of timeless 11-dimensional hyperspace. So we can merge Buddhism with the Judeo-Christian theory of Genesis into a single theory called the multiverse. And the multiverse has taken the physics community by storm. You can Google it. Many conferences are being held on the multiverse. So we believe now that our universe is not just one universe, but it's a bubble floating in a bubble bath of other universes. And when 2 bubbles collide, that's called the Big Bang. Or when a bubble fissions a baby bubble, that's also called the Big Bang. So in other words, we now know what happened before Genesis, that these bubbles constantly interact with each other. And this is the picture emerging from string theory.
Wow. Well, actually, since you brought up a couple of religions there, I've got a perfect question. Actually, a perfect question for you to go into. This comes in from Sean in Antioch, California, who says, now this is going to take a minute, he says, Stephen Hawking didn't think that there was an afterlife. He often compared the brain to a computer and said that once the hard drive died, that's it. But there is an overwhelming amount of evidence that remote viewing is a real phenomenon, and good remote viewers can accurately describe things on the moon or Mars that have been verified and confirmed. We have good evidence now that reincarnation is real. What about astral travel or out-of-body experiences? Don't some of these parapsychological events point to consciousness existing outside of the brain, outside of the body? And if so, isn't this evidence for an afterlife of some kind?
Well, I'm not a theologian, so I cannot answer the question one way or the other. However, in my other New York Times bestseller, The Future of the Mind, I do go through neurological studies about out-of-body experiences and the light that at the end of the tunnel that people see and near-death experiences. It turns out the Air Force is very much interested in that because our jet pilots suffer high G-forces as they make a U-turn, for example, on a jet, and blood drains from their brain. So the Air Force put our pilots in centrifuges, and just at the border of becoming unconscious, these pilots would lose their blood as blood drained from their brain and their eyes. What they saw was the peripheral vision began to be lost, and so they began to see less and less except for the very center, where there was a bright light. So in other words, the bright light at the end of the tunnel could be loss of blood to the brain in an accident or in a near-death experience or with jet pilots because you're in an ultracentrifuge and you see that bright light because the outer rim of your retina loses blood. While blood still concentrates at the center of your field of vision, and that creates a light at the end of the tunnel. And then if you have epileptics, scientists have to remove large portions of the skull to access the brain of epileptics. It doesn't hurt at all because the brain has no pain sensors at all. And then when you touch two lobes, one of hearing, one of eyesight, the brain gets confused because you're stimulating two lobes simultaneously. And at that point, the brain says, well, I'm getting conflicting images, so we are going to leave the body. You can induce out-of-body experiences this way. There was one lady in Germany who was an epileptic. They stimulated two parts of her brain, and immediately, like a light switch, you could induce out-of-body experience. You could induce it or shut it off, like a light switch, simply by stimulating two separate lobes of the brain, confusing the brain, and so the brain tries to make sense of it, and it does that by leaving the body. So out-of-body experiences can actually be duplicated in the laboratory. Now, does this explain all the mysteries of the mind? No. I'm just saying that this is a interpretation.
Well, that's a ride we need at the nearest amusement park. I would love for people to experience an out-of-body experience or something close to a near-death experience without the death part. I think it would be a profound experience for people to have in life. And then, now after listening to you talk about all of that, it makes me wonder then, what will the experience be, I wonder, when our consciousness is digitized? Will we be aware? Will we experience anything when we're transferred into a computer?
Well, I think things will be pretty much normal. You won't even know that your consciousness has been transferred into a computer because you'll live through a mechanical avatar, and so your sensations, your feelings will be that of a normal person. In fact, it could be even seamless. You won't even know that you've been digitized. And so I think that this is coming. It's coming because of the rate at which we are creating a digital signature, a digital fingerprint. Your credit card transactions. If I were to read your credit card transactions, I'd know where you like to vacation, the kinds of wines you like to drink, the kinds of movies you like to see, all of that simply by scanning your credit card transactions. Think of what will happen if I can scan everything, all your videotapes, Instagrams, all your emails, all of that. And then I can scan your brain. And at that point, you would get an extremely accurate representation of who you are. It won't be perfect, but once we have the connectome, it could be near perfect.
Have you watched that new show, Black Mirror?
No.
You haven't? There's this episode on Black Mirror, and it deals with technology, and it deals with how technology can go wrong. And there's an episode on Black Mirror where a girl, her boyfriend dies. And so there's this, in this world, at least in the television program, it's on Netflix, in that world, there's a company who has a very unique product. And that product is they'll do everything you just said to a person's consciousness, and somehow they can put that into an artificial body, and they ship it to your house, and this is what she does. She orders basically a copy of her boyfriend and gets that and follows all the instructions. There's instructions that come with the kit to bring your loved one back to life based on everything that's been posted on social media, the credit card transactions, anything that can be found digitally. They take and gather all that stuff up and try to produce a copy of this person that you once loved. And she finds, yes, once he opens his eyes and becomes aware or comes online, however you want to call it, it's him, but it's not quite the same. And she's really excited about it at first, and then she slowly starts to realize, God, it's just not the same. It's not the same. So I hope it's very, very lifelike. And I wonder what the first few editions will be like.
Well, I think it's going to be a process. The more information we get concerning your online transactions and things, the more accurate this artificial representation will be. But it will never be totally perfect until we get the connectome. Once we map every single neuron of the human body, perhaps by the end of the century, just like we mapped every gene of our body, which was once considered impossible, and now it's every day, it's an everyday phenomenon. Once we map every single neuron of the human brain, then I think this digital image will be near perfect. It'll have all the neural connections, meaning all the memories, all the sensations, all the emotions that you have inside your brain. And I think it'll be an extremely accurate copy of you that lives forever. Digital immortality is something that I think is well within the laws of physics.
You know, something I've noticed is that you've mentioned Mother Nature a lot and God a lot. If we want to find the one-inch equation that allows you to read the mind of God, does that mean that you believe in a godlike entity? And I'm not talking about the God of the Bible here, but I'm talking about a being that created the universe.
Well, I think Galileo said it best when he was asked about these cosmic questions about meaning and reality and religion. He said, the purpose of science is to determine how the heavens go. But the purpose of religion is to determine how to go to heaven. So, in other words, science is about natural law. And religion is about ethics, about how to be a good person, how to go to heaven. So there's no problem, there's no contradiction between these two, as long as we keep them distinct. The problem emerges when scientists begin to pontificate about people's ethics, or when ethicists begin to pontificate about natural law. That's when we get into all sorts of trouble. A lot of the troubles of the past can be laid to the blurring of these two things. But as long as we keep these two things separate, I think there's no problem at all. Because science does not determine ethics. Science, the science of DNA, the science of protons and electrons, does not dictate how you're going to become a good person, or the golden rule, or how to be kind to your neighbors. Looking at genetics and protons and neutrons does not give you the answer to that. But then, of course, Einstein was asked directly if he believed in God. And his answer, I think, was profound. His answer was, there really are two kinds of God, and we have to be very clear about this. The first God, he said, is the personal God, the God that you pray to, the God that smites the Philistines, the God that you pray to at Christmas time for that red bicycle that you've always wanted. Mm-hmm. Einstein did not believe that the Creator created this great universe of ours just so that we can smite the Philistines. He believed in the God of Spinoza, that is, a God of harmony, beauty, simplicity, elegance. The universe didn't have to be so gorgeous. It could have been random. It could have been ugly. It could have been messy. But here we are, conscious beings in a gorgeous universe. So he didn't think that was an accident. And so he talked about an old one, the lawgiver, that gave us the fundamental laws of the universe. And he compared himself to a child walking into a library for the first time, this huge, monstrous library with thousands and thousands of volumes, and all he could do is take the first volume and read the first chapter. That is how he viewed himself, that before him was the universe, all the laws of the universe laid out in front of him, but all he could do was read the first chapter.
So when you say you're looking for that one-inch equation that would allow you to read the mind of God, who are we talking about?
Well, he thought there was a lawgiver, that is the old one, as he wrote in his memoirs, that it couldn't have been an accident. In other words, if I take a sheet of paper, I can write down a one-inch equation which gives you all of general relativity. If you want to see it, you can get a copy of my PhD-level books. The quantum theory is the other great theory. That is more complicated because we have quarks and leptons and neutrinos and things like that. But it would occupy maybe one page. So on one page of a book, you can write down all the fundamental laws of the known universe. This is the theory of almost everything. The problem is that these two equations hate each other. They don't combine with each other very well at all. And that's what we physicists are trying to do. Combine all these equations into a single equation, a master equation, which would allow us to read the most intimate thoughts of God. And so that's the goal that Einstein laid out. And so he thought that there was a God of order and simplicity.
The God that gave us the laws of physics.
That's right.
Very cool. I like that. Okay, well then let's get back to some astrophysics, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I wanted to ask you this question. I don't want to run out of time before I do. Did you see the headline about finding this galaxy recently that has little to no dark matter?
I just saw the headline, And I think it's very interesting because dark matter is one of the great unsolved mysteries of the universe. If any of your listeners ever solve the problem of dark matter, be sure to have them contact me first.
Oh, we certainly will.
And we can split the Nobel Prize money together.
Yeah, I'll have them send you an email. Well, what does this tell us about dark matter if there's a galaxy out there that has very, very little of it?
Well, we also found a galaxy of the opposite that has almost no stars and is almost 100% dark matter. And so we now realize that galaxies can occur in all shapes and forms because, of course, the Big Bang was a catastrophic event, and it created galaxies of all sorts and all sorts of types. Now, first of all, what is dark matter? Every high school textbook is wrong when it says that the universe is mainly made out of atoms. We now know that most of the universe is not made out of atoms, it's made out of dark matter. But dark matter is invisible. If I held it in my hand, it would be invisible. But it would then filter through my fingers and then go through the Earth and go all the way to China and then oscillate between China and my hand. So dark matter, as you can see, is pretty exotic stuff. But we know what's out there. We have maps of dark matter now. Dark matter surrounds the Milky Way galaxy. It holds the galaxy together. Without dark matter, the galaxy would have flown apart, and the Earth would have been frozen billions of years ago. So we need dark matter to stabilize our galaxy, but we don't know what it is. Now, the leading theory is, and this is not confirmed, that it's a higher octave of the string. We are the lowest octave. That is, all the particles you see around you, the electrons and protons, they're nothing but strings vibrating in the lowest mode. But strings, of course, can have higher octaves. And we think that that's where dark matter comes in. The leading candidate for dark matter is called the photino. It's a subatomic particle. It is invisible. It has all the properties of dark matter, and we hope to produce it with the Large Hadron Collider outside Geneva, Switzerland. And that would go a long ways toward vindicating string theory, because string theory predicts what dark matter is.
Well, how far off do you think that is?
It could happen very soon. I mean, the Large Hadron Collider, we're cranking it up to 14 trillion electron volts, and there's the hope that maybe we can create dark matter in the laboratory. There's also the hope that we can detect it in our particle detectors. We have gigantic vats of liquid containing hydrogen, and any wind of dark matter passing through will interact with the protons inside the cleaning fluid and cause a spark when the proton disintegrates. So we have spark chambers looking for the signature of a proton which decays because of a collision with dark matter. That is also worth a Nobel Prize. And so the Nobel Prize could go to the physicists who create dark matter with the Large Hadron Collider or detect a collision with dark matter inside their detectors.
Well, I hope you out there are listening. He's giving you some pretty good clues on how to win a Nobel Prize, and I expect action from my audience out there. Well, here's another question from the listening audience. Actually, this comes from somebody with my own namesake, Heather, and she says, if the Chinese space station crashes near me, how far do I need to drive to get away from the radiation? I had more philosophical questions, but this one seemed more eminently important.
Well, sometime around April Fool's Day, an 18,000-pound space station is going to come crashing down on the planet Earth. More than likely, it's going to vaporize in the oceans because most of the Earth's surface is oceans. However, in the past, we've had satellites break up over Canada, break up over Australia, and who knows, maybe it could wind up in your backyard. A very tiny probability, 1 in less than a trillion, but it cannot be ruled out. For example, the worst case that we had of a breakup of a satellite was a Russian satellite, Cosmos 954, in 1978. It was a nuclear reactor containing weapons-grade uranium. It broke up over Canada, spewed radiation, real toxic radiation over hundreds of miles of tundra. The CIA was very curious about a Russian nuclear reactor, so it sent a team of Huskies to retrieve parts of this failed Soviet reactor. Now, this new satellite is bigger. It's 18,000 pounds. It's about the size of a school bus, and it is not radioactive. So don't worry that you're going to have a piece of uranium in your backyard. The chances of being hit by it are near zero, but it can't be ruled out. One person was actually hit by a piece of space debris. That was the only documented time when somebody actually was hit by space debris. So probably it's just going to burn up over the Pacific or Atlantic Ocean, but it's not guaranteed.
Which means it's going to hit my house. Okay. All right. I just wanted to be sure. This is really my favorite question of all the questions that we received for you, Doctor. This comes from somebody by the name of Hawk, who asks, what is your theory of consciousness?
Well, I have an unorthodox theory that I laid out in my book, The Future of the Mind. I think you can measure and grade levels of consciousness. I think even animals are conscious. And I think that consciousness is basically the sum total of all feedback loops necessary to create a model of yourself in space and time. So the unit of consciousness would be a thermostat. A thermostat is aware of its surroundings and adjusts the temperature, and so it actually has a feedback loop. So I think that a thermostat has one unit of consciousness. An alligator, I think, would have maybe a few hundred units because it understands space. It creates a model of itself and its prey and its mate in three-dimensional space. So alligators and reptiles in general have a good spatial understanding. That's the back of your brain, the reptilian brain. The center part of your brain is the social brain, the monkey brain. That's the brain of society, social manners, etiquette, deferring to your elders, emotions. That's the monkey brain, the limbic system. But what are we then? If alligators have spatial consciousness, if monkeys have social consciousness, then what separates humans from animals? I think what separates humans from animals is the front part of our brain, not the back, but the front part of our brain. And that's the prefrontal cortex, which understands time. We scheme, we plan, we plot all the time. Let's do an experiment. Go home tonight and talk to your dog and teach your dog the meaning of tomorrow. Well, you'll find you can't do it.
Right.
Animals do not understand tomorrow. They understand now, the present, a very accurate description of the present. But we simulate the future. We daydream, we plot, we scheme. That's what the prefrontal cortex does. And so that's consciousness. Consciousness, I think, is creating a model of yourself in space, in society, and in time. And I think that this is how we can rank robots and rank animals on a consciousness scale. Like robots, how do robots compare with animals? Robots would compare with a cockroach, an insect, barely rating on this scale. So robots are very primitive. We don't have much to worry about them at the present time. In the future, of course, you might have to worry about them. But robots can be ranked. They have consciousness of an alligator, basically, spatial consciousness. They have no understanding of emotions, no understanding of human nature and human foibles, and they certainly cannot simulate the future. For example, if you were to ask a robot to rob a bank, the robot would be paralyzed. It cannot simulate the future because the data is not inserted into its memory. It doesn't know what a bank is. It doesn't know how to rob a bank. It doesn't know how to get away. None of that is programmed into the robot. So I think that a simple task that even a baby can understand by watching television, that is how to rob a bank, our most advanced robots cannot duplicate.
Well, then
consciousness, I think, is on a scale of consciousness. The highest level of consciousness is temporal consciousness. That is the ability to see the future.
And I like the system of being able to measure consciousness. That's interesting.
A number of feedback loops necessary to create a model. Like I said, a thermostat has one unit. A flower has maybe 5 units of consciousness. It understands moisture, temperature, direction of gravity. So a plant may have 5 units of consciousness, but an alligator may have 100 units. There's 100 feedback loops by which it creates a model of itself and its prey and its mate.
And so the human would have how many units?
Oh, we're talking thousands of feedback loops. Eyesight, hearing, sense of touch. We would have hundreds of feedback loops and then a memory to store all that information. You see, animals do not have much of a memory. They don't need much of a memory. When it's time to hibernate, they don't say it's time to hibernate. It's just the temperature gets cold, and it triggers the hibernation instinct. Mm-hmm. So animals live really just in the present with very little memory of the past. When you brain scan a human, by the way, and you ask a human to daydream about the future, what part of their brain lights up? The part of the brain that lights up is accessing memories of the past. That's why we have a memory. That's why animals probably don't have much of a memory. We constantly relive the past in order to simulate the future. That's the purpose of memory. The purpose of memory, we think, is to simulate the future.
And haven't we been able to upload some memories into digitized memories? I know I've heard you talking about digitizing dreams before.
That's
also.
Right. At Wake Forest University, also in Los Angeles, scientists have been able to record memories, simple memories in mice, upload memories as well, and now they're doing it on primates. And eventually they'll do it in Alzheimer's patients to upload memories in Alzheimer's patients. And who knows, maybe in the future you'll push a button and you'll upload calculus inside your memory. We're not there yet.
Or Kung Fu. Can I upload Kung Fu? I would love to do that.
But simple memories can now be uploaded into the mind. And this is something we've already done. Now, photographing a dream is also possible. At Berkeley, where I got my PhD so many years ago, scientists there have brain scanned the brain and calculated blood flow in about 30,000 locations in the living brain, put these 30,000 pixels into a computer, which then calculates from these 30,000 dots a picture of what you are thinking of. And then when you go to sleep inside the MRI machine, it's quite difficult, but you can do it. When you go to sleep inside this MRI machine, it then prints out a picture of your dream. This is incredible. We can now begin to access dreams. I've seen some of these pictures. They're pretty crude, so don't get your hopes up. But the very fact that I can talk about this and not sound crazy is amazing.
Well, yes,
we can actually be in the process of photographing dreams. And we can now show that lucid dreaming is real. Lucid dreamers can actually control consciously the direction of their dream. If they're wandering in a forest, they can actually decide to go left or right consciously. And we've now proven that lucid dreaming is real. In Germany, at the Max Planck Institute, they put a lucid dreamer in an MRI machine, and they found out that his prefrontal cortex, that is the thinking part of the brain, was fully active as he was dreaming, and we knew he was dreaming because the center part of his brain was active. That's why we have nightmares, for example, because of the amygdala creates nightmares, and that's why many dreams have a nightmarish quality to them. But you can actually control the direction of your dream with these lucid dreamers. And this has now been documented using MRI scans. And if you read some Buddhist texts, there are ancient Buddhist texts, hundreds of years old, that teach you lessons of how you can become a master of lucid dreaming so that you can control your dreaming process.
Yeah,
this is amazing.
Yeah, we talk about it a lot on the show, how to do lucid dreaming, but this is just incredible to me. So you've seen some of these pictures. So for example, if a person is dreaming of, say, an apple, how clear is the picture of the apple when it is then, I don't know, is this uploading or downloading, doctor?
Well, it turns out that if a person focuses on an object like a person's face, then the human brain can be scanned using an MRI machine. A computer can then analyze all the blood flow at 30,000 locations in the living brain. And there's a software program that then extracts a picture from that mass of data points. And it's a reasonable approximation. It is fuzzy. You can see pictures of it on the Internet. It is fuzzy, but the very fact that we can actually extract pictures of elephants and airplanes and people from a living brain is quite incredible. I've seen some of the pictures of the dreams. They're not very impressive. You can basically see a face of some sort. But in the future, when we get better at this, we'll have more than just 30,000 pixels. We'll probably have millions of pixels, in which case we'll be able to create a much better representation of what is inside your mind.
Man, that is incredible. I mean, this is stuff straight out of a science fiction movie. It's sometimes hard to believe that the things you're telling me tonight are real.
And we do it. This is not science fiction. I document the people doing it, where it's being done, how it's being done, in my previous bestseller, The Future of the Mind.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Wow. Wow. There's so much ahead of us. I wonder, with the advancement of technology, do we have the morality to deal with how fast technology is going?
Well, we have to be careful with technology. Technology is a double-edged sword, right? One side of the sword can cut against ignorance, poverty, disease, but the other side of the sword can cut against you and me if it's not controlled correctly by the people. And when you take a look at these, for example, uploading memories, at MIT, they were able to upload false memories in mice. So in the future, just like movies have a disclaimer at the beginning saying that all the characters are fictional, when you upload a vacation in Hawaii, which never happened, you may have to have a disclaimer saying, you never had this vacation. This is purely fictional, but you will think you had this vacation because we're going to upload the memory of a vacation into your brain.
Just like Total Recall. Man.
Just like Total Recall, right.
Wow.
Science fiction is not too far from science fact.
Yeah, well, the line is apparently getting blurrier and blurrier, Doctor. There's another question that I cannot let this night go by without asking you. Why was the discovery of gravity waves important?
Well, back in 1916, Einstein predicted that even gravity has a speed. For example, if the sun were to disappear right now, if the sun were to suddenly disappear, how long would it take for the Earth to feel its effect? Well, Newton would say instantly, that the universe instantly would know that the sun has disappeared. Einstein says, not so fast. The speed of light is the ultimate velocity for everything, including gravity. So it would take 8 minutes. 8 minutes for the Earth to be flung into outer space. So we wanted to know the answer to that question. And by detecting gravity waves, bingo. These gravity waves traveled at the speed of light from the collision of two black holes in a distant part of the universe. So we know that Einstein was right, once again, that even gravity travels at the speed of light. Now, we knew that to be true. However, we have to have proof. Science is based on proof, not just hope and wish. We wanted to prove it, and that's why it won the Nobel Prize.
But why is it important? I want to understand this. I mean, I am not a physicist. I'm not a theoretical physicist, and I'm trying to figure out exactly why is this important. Is it important to know that gravity waves exist? Is it important to know that they can travel the speed of light?
Well, you see, gravity is what holds the universe together. And if our understanding of gravity is wrong, then our understanding of the Big Bang, black holes, all of that could also be wrong. And so we use Einstein's theory and we test it, and we find that each time we test it against the Big Bang, against black holes, it comes out right on the dot. And so that's how we know with confidence that we can make statements about the creation of the universe and about what happens at the center of a black hole, because we've been able to test Einstein's theory, and it comes out correct every single time. And of course, even beyond that, Einstein's theory predicts things like time travel, wormholes, things that come right out of science fiction. You can find them in Einstein's theory. How reliable is Einstein's theory when it talks about time travel and it talks about wormholes and gateways to other dimensions? That's why we want to test the limits of how far we can push Einstein's theory until it starts to break down.
Okay, so if you prove one aspect of the theory, then that implies, well, other aspects of the theory must also be true. right? Okay.
Right, and if any one aspect is wrong, the whole theory could be wrong. But each time we test Einstein's theory, it comes out exactly on the dot.
Well, I really appreciate that, because I've been trying to understand this on my own and not doing a very good job of it, Doctor, so thank you very much for that. At least now I can talk about the subject and know a little something about what I'm saying. Now, I want to go to, I have a wormhole. See, I'm a step ahead of everybody else out there. I inherited a wormhole from Art. So in the wormhole, we got a question from Tony in Wisconsin that kind of goes back to the topic of digital consciousness. He says, well, who's to say we're not already digitized? For example, the computer simulation theory. We wouldn't know, though, would we? So what about this idea that we live in a simulation? Would we even know? Is it even possible?
I think so. First of all, we've all seen the movie The Matrix. And so then the question is, well, is reality itself simply uploaded into our brain? Or are we living out a simulation? Does somebody have a CD-ROM player and pushes the play button? And here we are having this conversation just because somebody hit a play button? I don't think so. First of all, our most advanced computers cannot even model the weather very accurately. The weather consists of so many molecules bumping into each other that no computer can simulate the weather. In fact, the smallest object that can simulate the weather is the weather itself. Nothing smaller than the weather can simulate the weather. That's why we say it's unsimulatable. So take a look now at quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics makes it worse, because instead of atoms being small billiard balls obeying Newton's laws of motion, now they're quantum mechanical. Now they can disappear, reappear someplace else, be two places at the same time. All the bizarre motions of the quantum theory are at the molecular level, making it infinitely more difficult to compute their behavior in a computer. And so I think the smallest object that can simulate your living room is your living room. And so I don't think that we are living in a simulation. I don't think anybody hit the play button today.
No? Well, I heard about there was some unnamed billionaires who were going to work on trying to break us out of the simulation, and I was trying to figure out if they were wasting their money or not. So apparently they are.
Yeah, I think so. I can think of better ways to spend $1 billion.
Yeah, so could I, in fact. So could I. Well, let's do this, Dr. Kaku. Let's jump into the phones and see what is out there. I don't screen calls around here, so I have no idea what is about to hit us. Let's see. We'll just go right here on this line. You're on the air with Dr. Michio Kaku. Welcome to the program. That's my luck, Doctor. There's nobody on the line. All right, we'll try over here. You are, I hope, on the air with Dr. Michio Kaku. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Heather Wade. I'd just like to thank you for taking my call. And hi, Dr. Michio Kaku. This is the first time I've heard about you, and I'm very fascinated with physics. Well, let me just jump right into it. One of my favorite questions about physics is going back in time. Is it possible if we could, visit a dead relative, fix something that we wanted to fix, talk to our younger selves? I mean, there's a lot of things going on around right now, like, about physics and all that, like Stranger Things on Netflix and all that. So I wanted to know, what's the theory you were talking about that Einstein said about going in the past? And, could it be possible through wormholes or can you tell me more about that?
Yes. You see, Isaac Newton thought that time was like an arrow. Once you fire it, it never deviates. So 1 second on the Earth is 1 second on the Moon is 1 second throughout the entire universe. Einstein says not so fast. Time is a river. It's a river that can speed up and slows down as it meanders throughout the universe. Now, the new wrinkle on this, coming from string theory and other theories, is that there could be whirlpools in the river of time, or the river of time could fork into two separate rivers. These are called closed time-like loops. You can Google that, and that's the scientific word for a time machine. Now, it turns out that Einstein's equations allow for closed time-like curves. For example, a wormhole that you mentioned can not only take you to a distant point in space, it can also take you to a distant point in time as well. Then there are two questions that come up. One is how practical a machine would look like to build a time machine. And second of all, what about the paradoxes of time travel?
Yes.
Well, the first problem is very large. It takes the energy of a black hole to begin to warp the river of time. So no inventor is going to create a DeLorean in their living room or basement to go backwards in time. Second, Einstein's equations do allow for time travel. But then the question, what happens if you, for example, meet yourself as a child and commit suicide in the past? How could you be alive if you just killed your earlier self in a time machine? Well, when you apply quantum mechanics to time travel, the universe could fork into two rivers. So the timeline now becomes two timelines. So when you go backwards into the past to change the past, you change somebody else's past, not your own. Your own past cannot be changed, but you change somebody else's past because the timeline split in half. So this means that if you go backwards in time to save Abraham Lincoln from being assassinated at the Ford Theater, you've saved somebody else's Abraham Lincoln. This is the many worlds theory, and the many worlds theory comes out of quantum mechanics. So the river of time forks into two rivers, so there are no paradoxes. All the so-called paradoxes of time travel are easily resolved once you split the river of time.
But is it like Interstellar, where you go through the black hole? I thought we would die if we went through a black hole.
Well, that's what high school textbooks tell us, but high school textbooks are wrong.
Uh-huh.
You see, first of all, black holes are not stationary. They're rotating very rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
We clock them at about 1 million miles an hour, in fact. And if you were to fall through and see the center of the black hole, it would not be a dot, which is what most high school textbooks say. It's actually a ring, a rotating ring that's kept afloat because of centrifugal force. And if you fall through the center of the ring, at least mathematically speaking, you don't die. You find that the Einstein curvature tensor is finite at the center, and you fall right through it into a parallel universe. That's a wormhole. That looks like the looking glass of Alice. So the looking glass of Alice is the wormhole. You stick your hand through the wormhole, and you wind up on the other side of the universe. And the rim of the looking glass is the black hole itself. And if you go through a second time through the wormhole, you wind up on another parallel universe. And you can keep on doing this over and over again. It's like hitting the up button in an apartment building. Every floor corresponds to a universe. The elevator corresponds to the wormhole, and you can actually go up across many parallel universes.
Well, you know, we worry about man getting out into space and taking our warlike nature and our weapons out into space. Well, just look out, because when we start going through wormholes, we're going to be taking our warlike nature and our weapons over into other dimensions and other timelines. So look out, universe.
I hope by then we will have evolved into what is called a Type 1 civilization, which is planetary, and most of the regional conflicts have been resolved. And so many of the conflicts that we see today, we are a Type 0 civilization, will be resolved once we become a planetary Type 1 civilization. And so when we go into outer space, we're not necessarily going to bring all our weapons and warlike instincts with us, because by that time we'll have become Type 1 civilization. By the way, Type 2 civilization is stellar. They control the output not just of a planet, but a star, like the Federation of Planets. Star Trek would be a typical Type 2 civilization. Mm-hmm. And then a Type 3 civilization would be galactic. They roam the galactic space lanes like Star Wars. They control black holes. And so Star Wars would be a typical Type 3 civilization. But unfortunately, we're Type 0. We get our energy from dead plants, oil and coal.
Mm-hmm, that is right. But am I remembering this correctly? I think I heard you say one time that the Internet could be considered a Type 1 communications system.
That's right. Because we are nearing the point of making a transition to Type 1, we see Type 1 technologies beginning to blossom. The first major Type 1 technology is the Internet. It is a planetary telephone system. And so we're privileged to be alive to witness the beginning of a Type 1 architecture for our society. Also the language. What language will this Type 1 civilization speak? Already on the Internet, English and Mandarin Chinese are the two dominant languages on the Internet. We're seeing the beginning of a Type 1 culture, Type 1 sports, the Olympics, soccer, the beginning of Type 1 sports, rock and roll, the beginning of a Type 1 youth culture. And Chanel and Gucci, the beginning of a Type 1 high fashion. These are planetary cultural achievements. And we see the beginning of a Type 1 culture emerging.
Very exciting times to be living in, Doctor. All right, well, let's go then back to the phone. We'll just go right on over here. On this line, you're on the air with Dr. Michio Kaku. Welcome to the show.
Good evening, Heather. Good evening, Dr. Kaku. This is Mike in Montana.
Welcome.
Dr. Kaku, I was August 2016, I saw an article that came out about a Hungarian research group that found a protophobic exposon that they said interacted with electrons and neutrons rather than the electron-proton. Is that possibly measuring dark energy, or sensing dark energy, or they're discovering some way to measure it, maybe, or dark matter?
Well, let's get the term straight. Dark matter is invisible matter that holds the galaxy together, and we see evidence of it everywhere we look in the universe now. Dark energy is even more mysterious. Dark energy is the energy of the Big Bang. It's what drives galaxies apart. Why do galaxies fly away from each other in what is called the Big Bang Theory? And that's dark energy. Now, some people have claimed that maybe dark matter is made out of neutrons or neutrinos. Neutrinos and neutrons are both neutral. However, they don't fit the data. When you look at the cosmological data of the universe, it turns out that the dark matter is not baryonic. That is not made out of protons and neutrons or neutrinos. It's made out of something different, something completely different from atoms entirely. And as I mentioned, we think that it's nothing but a higher octave of a vibrating string. Now, dark energy is even more fantastic. We have no theory, really, that's accepted by everyone of dark energy. In fact, if you were to get a sheet of paper and calculate how much dark energy there is in the universe, you would be off by 10 to the 120th power. That's 1 with about 120 zeros after it. That is the biggest mismatch between theory and experiment in all of science. This is a huge embarrassment. The biggest mismatch between experiment and theory is 10 to the 120th power. So if any of you in the audience can figure out what dark energy is, tell me first.
Again, we'll make sure that we send you an email, Doctor.
Yeah, and we'll split the Nobel Prize money.
All right, it's a deal now. I'm holding you to that. I got some smart listeners out there in the audience. We'll hold you to that. All right, well, at least we have a plan. We'll go here to North American Skype, and you're on the air. By the way, thank you, Mike, for your call. You are now on the air with Dr. Michio Kaku. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Heather. Hi, Dr. Kaku. This is Matt from Toronto. I just had a question about what you were saying about a river forking. Is it possible that the same could be true about different dimensions or different realities merging together, like into one timeline?
Well, it turns out that, forget time travel for the moment. Just take a look at ordinary quantum mechanics. Ordinary quantum mechanics says that realities could split apart constantly. This is called the multiverse theory. When it was first proposed in the 1950s, many physicists didn't like it. But now it's more or less accepted by most of my colleagues, many of them Nobel Prize winners, by the way. And they accept the fact that the universe can be constantly splitting apart one by one. So then the next question is, well, is Elvis Presley still alive in one of these other parallel universes?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is, well, yes. You can calculate the probability that, yes, our universe fissioned, and in one half, the universe evolved such that Elvis Presley did not take so many drugs and is still alive. This cannot be ruled out. Then the question is, why can't we talk to him? If quantum mechanics, which is the ultimate theory of reality, is correct, if it makes transistors and the internet possible, then the next question is, why can't we enter these other universes and visit people that have died in our universe? This is called the cat problem. Can a cat be simultaneously dead and alive at the same time? The Schrödinger cat problem is perhaps the deepest of all paradoxes in all of physics. Nobel Prize winners, even today, debate this question at physics conferences that I've attended. And what is gaining traction is the multiverse theory, the fact that the universe is probably splitting apart. The timeline is constantly splitting apart. Now, why can't we visit these other timelines? Because each timeline is vibrating. Our universe vibrates at a certain frequency. However, these other universes vibrate at a different frequency. And that's why we cannot freely go between universes. This is called decoherence. Coherence is when two universes vibrate in unison. That's called coherence. When they go out of phase, they no longer interact with each other, and that's called decoherence. So in other words, we have decohered from these other universes. So sorry about that. Even though you can calculate the probability that you will one day encounter Elvis Presley, the probability is so small, you would have to wait longer than the lifetime of the universe for this to happen. But it could happen.
Well, that might quash our theory of what's causing the Mandela effect. We seem to think that it might be parallel universes maybe converging and then splitting apart from each other, or timelines possibly crossing and then uncrossing. We're really trying to figure this out. Have you heard about the Mandela effect?
No. Could you explain?
Sure. It's a little complicated, but let me see if I can't simplify it down. So, we remember a lot of things in a certain way. We remember how Oscar Mayer hot dogs is spelled. We remember that in Star Wars, Darth Vader said, "Luke, I am your father," right? Well, now, people are starting to notice that some of these things have changed. It all started with Nelson Mandela. Actually, it all started with a call to Art Bell on his program. Somebody called Art, and they said, "Hey, I just found out that Nelson Mandela passed away." And he said, "Well, wait a minute. No, hang on. I remember him dying a few years ago in prison." And it started this phenomenon. All of a sudden, everybody called him that night, and they said, "I remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison, too." And this doctor has just caught like wildfire. Everybody, they're finding more and more instances of things that they remember one way, and then they go back to try to check that. A good example is life is like a box of chocolates. Well, apparently that has changed to something else. Life was a box of chocolates or something like that. And so people are trying to figure out, number one, is this a real phenomenon? And two, why is this happening? Do we simply remember things wrong? Or is there something else going on? It will boggle the mind. Whenever I do a show on the Mandela effect, by the time it's over with, you can almost see the smoke kind of coming out of my ears trying to figure this out.
Gee, well, I don't know. I don't know that much about this effect. Let me say, though, one thing, and this may or may not shed some light on the question. Sometimes you're thinking about somebody, and then the telephone rings, and it's that person. Mm-hmm. And you say to yourself, I'm psychic. I was thinking about that person, and the person then called me on the phone. This has happened to me several times. Uh-huh. But then I realized that, well, yeah, but many times I thought about somebody else, and they never called. Uh-huh. In fact, I then said to myself, how many times have I thought about somebody else and they didn't call? And the answer is hundreds of times I think about people and they never call. But I only remember the times when the person does call, and then I say, I'm psychic. So I'm not saying that this can explain anything at all, except that the human brain remembers the positive hits and does not remember the misses. And so every time something happens which is coincidental, maybe it's coincidental, maybe it's not. But the brain thinks, aha, I'm psychic.
Aha, the timelines are obviously converging and have caused Oscar Mayer to now be spelled wrong. It's a weird
phenomenon. You can't rule it out, but who knows?
Yeah, well, exactly. Something else that I wanted to ask you about, really one of the listeners brought up this question, and it comes from Tony, who's out in Spain, and he says here, quantum computing is in early stages, and the race is on to become the first scientist, government, or military to invent a working model. Being quantum, where is the memory on such a massive scale stored?
Well, the quantum computer does not store memories per se. You can do that on silicon. The quantum computers allows you to calculate on individual atoms. So if I have a magnetic field, then atoms are like spinning tops. They will align themselves with the magnetic field, pointing, let's say, up. Now, when the atom goes backwards and flips the other way, that could be considered to be 0. If it points up, it's considered 1. So in this way, you can create a computer, zeros and ones, depending on whether the atom is spinning up or the atom is spinning down. Now, in quantum mechanics, atoms can be in between zeros and 1, which means that you can compute not just on bits of zeros and one, which is called digital, but on qubits, that is a number between 0 and 1, 0 and 1. Now, once a quantum computer can compute on about 50 qubits, it'll surpass any known digital computer. That's the magic number, 50. So if you could get a quantum computer that can compute on, for example, 50 atoms, then it could do a calculation better than any known digital computer and crack any code. That's why the CIA and the NSA and governments around the world are very much interested in quantum computers, because it would make obsolete all the codes that nations use to guard their secrets. So you can imagine this would be a tremendous breakthrough if we can get quantum computers. However, to be fair, I should point out that so far we're not close to 50, even though sometimes people advertise it as so. We're about maybe 5 or 6 or 7 in terms of reliable computation at the present time.
Okay. Well, help me understand something else about the quantum world. If we do achieve quantum computing, will we then achieve quantum communications? And once we do, isn't it true that quantum communications are an unhackable form of communication?
Yeah, this is called quantum cryptography. If I have a laser beam, and the laser beam has a certain polarization, it has to point in one direction, and you tamper with it, that automatically changes the direction of the polarization of the laser beam. So if anyone tries to hack into your communication system, which is on fiber optic cable, you immediately know because of the laws of quantum mechanics. So these are in some sense unbreakable. So people have thought that one day, once we have quantum cryptography, that we'll have a 2-layer of internet. One layer of the internet will be ordinary digital, which is hackable. Everybody could use it almost for free. But the other internet would be for governments and spy agencies and huge banks and corporations that have to protect their data with the laws of quantum mechanics. And so this is something which is very actively looking at right now, the question of whether or not we can create unhackable computer network. And it is certainly within the laws of physics to do so.
I think it's going to be revolutionary once we do see this, and I know when we can achieve quantum computing, that's going to change everything. That's going to change a whole lot for us. Wow. Well, it boggles the mind, Doctor. It really does. Oh, and by the way, I recommend that if you ever want to have your mind boggled, just start looking into the Mandela effect, and trust me, that will do it for you. We'll go here to the first-time caller line, and you're on the air with Dr. Michio Kaku. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Michio. It's an honor to talk to you. I actually saw you give a speech in Dallas once, and I had a couple of things I wanted to ask you, but the line was too long, so I didn't make it. So my question basically is, this is about space travel and space tourism, I guess. So say you live in Texas, and I always used to hear that if you go 6 miles straight up, you're in space. Maybe 100 miles beyond that, you escape the Earth's gravitational pull. So if things became cheaper eventually as a form of travel, do you think we could, like, say, fly 110 miles straight up, wait for the Earth to rotate? Say you're in Texas and you fly off, and then you want to go to Tokyo, and you wait for the Earth to spin around the top of Tokyo and then go straight back down. Do you think that's a means of travel that could be done one day? And then the other thing was about like a water filtration thing I was going to ask you about. But anyway, the first question.
Okay. Well, first of all, space tourism is going to be a reality very soon. We have Richard Branson of Virgin Galactic and Jeff Bezos of Amazon, both of them putting money on the table to make sure that space tourism becomes a reality. You go straight up 70 miles. 70 miles is considered, quote, the edge of space, and then you come straight back down in a suborbital flight. The cost of this will be about $200,000. That's the going rate for a trip into outer space. Then the question is, well, does the Earth rotate beneath you? Well, yes. The equator of the Earth rotates at about 1,000 miles an hour. And we know this because the circumference of the Earth is 24,000 miles, and there are 24 hours in a day. You divide 24 divided by 24, and bingo, you get 1,000 miles per hour. Now, when rockets are launched from Cape Canaveral, you realize that they don't essentially go straight up, they curve, because the Earth rotates beneath it. And so you see the fact of the rotating Earth when rockets go into outer space, and so you also see this effect. Now, however, does that mean you'll be able to go from here to Tokyo in just an hour or so? Well, no. I think it's more complicated than that. You would have to work out the celestial mechanics. It depends on the angle that you fly from. It depends on how far you go. It depends on the particulars. But, yeah, you could get a boost. You could get a slight boost from the rotation of the Earth as it rotates beneath you.
Interesting question, too. Thank you for the call. Just to try to get as many questions that listeners emailed me as possible, Doctor, here's an interesting one from Paul and Ella in Kentucky. They ask, what could be outside our universe?
Well, even children ask the question that if the universe is expanding, what is it expanding into?
Right.
If the universe is everything there is, then how can everything there is expand into anything at all? Well, if our universe is a bubble of some sort, we live on the skin of the bubble, and the bubble could be expanding, and you were to have an ant on this bubble, and you were to ask the ant, well, where are you expanding into? The ant would say that, well, my universe is two-dimensional. I can walk forward, backward, left, right, but the concept of up beyond the bubble is alien to me. There is no up, because the two-dimensional bubble is the universe. But we know, of course, that the bubble is expanding in the third dimension. So, even though we can't prove it, we think that our universe is expanding into hyperspace, that our universe is a bubble floating in a much larger arena of 11-dimensional hyperspace. And so we think that's what the universe is expanding into. It's expanding into another dimension.
Gosh, do you think ever that a non-theoretical physicist could ever visualize what this 11-dimensional hyperspace is?
Well, artists have tried to visualize these higher dimensions, Salvador Dali being perhaps one of the most important. When he painted Melted Clocks, that was an attempt to represent time as the fourth dimension. And when he painted Jesus Christ in Crucifixion Hypercubicus, he painted Jesus Christ crucified in the fourth dimension, crucified on a tesseract. In fact, there's a movie, A Wrinkle of Time, where the gateway between universes is the tesseract, which is a hypercube, a four-dimensional cube. And so one of my acquaintances was a mathematician at Brown University, and Salvador Dali would visit the math department at Brown University and pepper the mathematicians about the fourth dimension, because he wanted to represent the fourth dimension in his artwork. So in some sense, surrealism was an attempt by Salvador Dali to represent spatial and temporal dimensions on a canvas, and that's called surrealism. So artists have tried to visualize these things. When I was a kid, I tried to visualize the fourth dimension. I tried to leap into the fourth dimension, and I realized you can't do it. Our brain evolved in a three-dimensional universe. Computers can do it easily. Computers manipulate in hyperspace all the time. Your laptop calculates in hyperspace. But the brain, unfortunately, evolved in three dimensions, and our brain can only imagine movement in three dimensions, while computers have no problem at all manipulating in hyperspace.
Again, the fish is trying to figure out what the water is. So it makes it a little bit difficult. Well, thank you. We'll go back into the phones here on this line. You're on the air with Dr. Michio Kaku. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Heather. This is Andrew in Indiana.
Hi, Andrew.
So I have a theory of mine to run by Dr. Kaku, it's about gravity and black holes and wormholes. So my theory is that the sun and most other stars are actually artificial objects that are made by a higher type of civilization, and that the stars themselves, is what we know them to be, energy factories of nuclear fusion, are actually powering the wormholes. And each star is we know the term like a stargate, which is opening to a wormhole. And I think that that's possible, but I don't know everything about the physics behind it. So I just wanted to run this theory. And the way black holes fit into it is that there's actually a black hole in between every two stars that are connected by these wormholes, and that's the way the wormhole works. Is the opening is powered by the stars, and the black hole, what's inside of it, is actually the wormhole. And I don't think that would be well understood by physics, but maybe something about stars, or maybe something we don't know about them. So I just wanted to run that by you, Dr. Kaku.
All right. Well, thank you for the call. We'll find out just how feasible any of your theory is, Doctor.
Okay. Well, take a look at our sun. Our sun is not big enough or powerful enough to become a black hole. Our sun will basically die as a white dwarf star when it uses up its nuclear fuel. So black holes are the exception. That is, it takes a giant star 10 to 50 times as massive as our sun in order to collapse it down to a black hole. And then the question is, well, what is the wormhole? We're not sure, but at the center of the black hole, at least in theory, mathematically, there could be a gateway or a wormhole at the center of the black hole. We don't know for sure because, of course, no one's ever gone through a black hole and lived to tell about it. So the idea that stars could become black holes, well, as I said, it takes a giant star up to 50 times more massive than our sun to become a black hole. And the black hole at the center of our galaxy weighs millions of times more than the mass of our sun. So stars are just that. They're balls of hydrogen gas, for the most part. They burn nuclear fuel, but only a fraction of them are large enough to become giant stars that will undergo supernova and then create a black hole. And maybe a fraction of these black holes, in turn, have a wormhole at the very center.
Aha, so you're saying his theory is wrong.
Well, I'm not ruling it out, but I'm saying that it doesn't jive too much with the current theory that says that only giant stars can become black holes.
And in his theory, it was every star. Okay, all right. Well, then maybe his theory is partially correct. I think we may have us an astrophysicist in the making here. Maybe with such an interest in the topic, you might want to get involved in the topic, maybe professionally. Thank you very much for the call. I appreciate the call. On this line, you're on the air now with Dr. Michio Kaku. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hello, Doctor.
Can you get a little closer to your phone? You sound real far away, and I want everyone to hear what you have to say.
Yes, is this better?
That is much better. Thank you.
Okay. Doctor, if you could speak briefly regarding the theory of the worlds that exist between individual atoms, or I guess basically any matter?
Well, there is something called the worlds within worlds theory, or the onion theory, that says that there is a new reality every time you go down a scale. At the scale of galaxies, for example, we have the Big Bang and the universe obeying one laws of physics, and then we go down to the scale of a star and a planet, where we have planetary physics. Then we go even further down to the molecular scale, where we have molecules. We go even further down to that, to go down to the subatomic realm, and we go even further than that, and perhaps we go to the realm of the string, that all particles are nothing but different musical notes on a vibrating string. And then the question is each of these universes a reality? Can people live in these different universes? Well, the answer is probably no, because each level that I talked about obeys a different set of physical laws. Now, the ultimate laws are going to be the same throughout all these different spheres. But within each sphere, the sphere of galaxies, the sphere of stars, the sphere of molecules and atoms, they have their own effective theory, which is derived from quantum mechanics and Newton's laws of motion. And at the atomic scale, you cannot have people that are shrunk down to the atomic level. There's a movie with Matt Damon that just came out about shrinking people. It turns out that atoms cannot be shrunk. Atoms obey the laws of quantum mechanics, and you cannot shrink the size of an atom. Sorry about that. And the laws of physics at the atomic scale show that all electrons are identical. There's no such thing as a green electron or a blue electron. All electrons have the same properties. They have mass, they have spin, and they have charge. And that's about it. And so to create a world inside an electron would be very boring, because all electrons are identical, and all you can say is their spin, their mass, and their charge. And so that's where the many worlds theory, a theory of worlds within worlds, begins to break down. So the world at the atomic level would be bizarre, crazy, but ultimately rather boring, because all electrons are identical.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for the call. Another really good question. We'll keep going here to, where to go? Right here. You're on the air with Dr. Michio Kaku. Welcome to the show. All right. Well, it doesn't sound like there's anybody there. On this line, you are on the air with Dr. Michio Kaku. Welcome to the program.
Hola, Heather. Dr. Kaku.
Welcome. Welcome to the show. Yes.
This is Juan from Atlanta.
Hi, Juan.
Okay. And Dr. Kaku, the question was kind of broached a little bit earlier, but if humans could perceive in the 11 dimensions, what would we experience? If we had the sensory ability to see what those 11 dimensional space is like.
Oh, okay.
Well, you see, we have sense organs and brains that evolved in the third dimension because we had emergencies in the third dimension. We had to escape saber-toothed tigers and charging mammoths and things. Mammoths do not strike at us from the fourth or fifth dimension. So there was no necessity for evolution to create a brain that can visualize and conceptualize these other dimensions. However, that's a fluke of nature. We think that the universe originally started off as 11-dimensional. Some of these dimensions may have curled up so that we can't interact with these higher dimensions anymore. But we think that at the beginning of time, the universe was in fact fully 11-dimensional. But it's very difficult for us to visualize or to try to interact with these things because it's beyond human comprehension. Now, in mathematics, we realize that the number 3 for 3 dimensions is not anything special. There's absolutely nothing special about the number 3. So why should we live in 3 dimensions when 3 is not a magic number of mathematics? Well, it turns out that 11 is one of the magic numbers of mathematics. And as a consequence, we borrow many of these mathematical identities into physics, and that's where these higher dimensions come from. But in order to visualize them, to try to sense them, is beyond our sensory capability. Sorry about that. Artists have tried to visualize these things by perhaps taking cross sections of these higher dimensions or unraveling them. If you take a look at Salvador's painting, Crucifixion Hypercubicus, his famous painting of Jesus Christ being crucified, you realize that it's a hypercube that is unraveled. If I have a cardboard box and I unravel it, open it up, what do I get? I get a cross. So if you get a hypercube and you were to unravel it, what would you get? A tesseract, which is an unraveled hypercube. It looks like a cross, but in 3 dimensions. And that, of course, is the basis of the movie A Wrinkle in Time, where the tesseract represents the gateway to hyperspace.
Well, if this is what you're working on now, or at least, you know what, if I think about it, I think your book tour for the future of humanity has concluded. Isn't that right? So what are you working on next?
Professionally, I work in physics. I publish papers in physics. Interacting with the public is sort of a hobby of mine. And so I'm going to go back to working on Einstein's unified field theory.
You know what? I would really love it if you could solve this Mandela effect for us. We would really appreciate that. Over here in the paranormal world, that is. This is something that we really want to understand. So you're going to write more papers, no hint on a future book?
Well, I'm always thinking about possibilities.
Thank you very, very much, Doctor. You've given me so much to think about. I think it's going to take me a year before I'm ready to have you back on the show. Good night.